Hi there, everyone. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and I'm here to talk about understanding Mars in apocalyptic times, summer 2020 edition. So before I do that, I just want to introduce myself and get into just a little bit of housekeeping. First off, my name, again, is Sarah DeHaven. I'm an independent astrologer who has been studying evolutionary astrology for a few years now through the Evolutionary Astrology Network with Kim Marie and through the School of Evolutionary Astrology and the message board and the course there. So I will say I'm not officially an evolutionary astrologer, but man, do I have a lot of love for it because well, it's right up my alley. I love evolutionary astrology, but I also use some esoteric techniques that are kind of, I guess we could say, a conglomeration of traditional astrology, some modern astrology, psychological astrology, and some other occult astrology techniques. Though during this talk today, where we're going to be focusing on Mars, I will be drawing quite a lot from evolutionary astrology, and so yeah, I just want to preface that. Also, I want to say too, like, this is just my perspective as, like I said, as an independent astrologer. And so I'm hoping very much that what we cover today will be useful to you. And I just want you to know where I'm at, who I am, and where I'm coming from, so that you know, like who's giving you this information and why. Part of my motivation is, well, as part of my work, understanding the soul and understanding the psyche, and then using that to our potential, expressing ourselves from the truth of who we are. It's very important in my work. And with this talk today, we're highlighting Mars, and Mars is kind of like the planet of how we get what we want, how we go after things, how we literally get out of bed in the morning, the impetus to get out of bed in the morning. So it's a key piece to evolution. And I've got some pieces to go through as far as that's concerned as well. So yes, let's see here. What I want to cover today, making most of Mars, the most of Mars during what we would call the summer of the apocalypse. I might be a little hyperbolic on that one, but I do feel that it may be very apt. Another aspect of Mars, and well, really Pluto as well, is in Capricorn in particular. We're going to be looking into toxic masculinity, or we could call it the misuse of masculine energy. And we're going to be looking at that in our modern society, how to heal from it from within. And this is for anyone, because everyone has masculine energy or yang energy in us, right? Also going to touch on the current state of human consciousness in relation to the shifts that are happening right now. We can see them depicted via Uranus and Taurus. We can see them depicted in other slower moving transpersonal planets like Neptune, currently in Pisces, and Pluto, currently in Capricorn. And they're all in yin signs, which I find really interesting. So it's like, how do you use Mars in a time when transpersonal planets, which have a lot to do with, yes, they have generational impact, but they also have impact in more, we could say, subconscious, unconscious, and even spiritual ways, right? Let's see here. So how do you use yin planets like that with our Mars in a conscious way? Unconscious, subconscious, spirit and soul-based planets. Not everyone's tapped into that, but there's techniques even if you're not fully tapped into. So we're going to see if we can expound on that, ways to make the most of it. And also, so moving on, preparing for what's to come, because a lot of us are aware, most of us who are kind of paying attention to the weather this year especially, Mars will be going retrograde in Aries on September 10th, I believe it is. And so that means that Mars will be in Aries longer than any other sign this year. And given everything that's been going on this year, it might be good to know how we can use those energies so that we are growing and in the most healthy and positive ways possible. And yes, let's see. Yes. When times are precarious and uncertain. Oh man, is it ever true. All right, so I just wanted to show this screen here briefly. This I got from etymology.com. It's just a quick little look at the etymology behind apocalypse, because a lot of people look at that word and they confuse it with perhaps maybe Armageddon. which is like utter destruction. Whereas if you look here, apocalypse, it seems to be have its roots in the Greek language, and apo seems to, you know, say off and away from, and I don't know, kalyptian, I can't pronounce Greek, so you'll have to apologize, or you'll have to forgive me, but apa and then calyps, we can see the calyps part is sort of like the cover, and the apa part is to remove the cover. So it's like removing a veil. And this is so interesting when I think about this revelation or disclosure, as we could see in the 14th century, how they define this word. It's just really interesting to me to consider that with piercing the veils, because piercing the veils of consciousness seems to be very much a part of growing in consciousness. And it's not always a fun process, and it's not always a comfortable process, yet going into out of our comfort zone is definitely how we evolve, as we can see evidenced in the nodes of all of the planets, yeah? So I just thought I'd share this with you. Apocalypse has more to do with revelations and disclosure, piercing veils, rather than destruction. So with revelation, what will come next? Well, that remains to be seen, perhaps. So we're going to be looking at charts later on, and I also want to throw it out there too. If anyone has any comments or questions during this talk, jump in at any time. Please feel free to do that, and I'll just continue to go through the material and share that with you. So Mars, Neptune, it's in a new phase right now. Mars and Neptune. Mars is currently in, well, actually, I think it's still in Pisces. And it is just recently, in recent days, gone into a conjunction with Neptune. This is an interesting point because at this point, Mars is ending a cycle with Neptune, which, I mean, this is just my take on it, but I kind of see through how Jeff Wolf Green has shared his interpretation of Neptune, how I've interpreted that, is it's sort of like our phone line to source and the quality of that connection, we could say, or our phone line to spirit and the quality of connection. How clear is that connection? How clear can we hear it? And is it consistent? It might not always be with Neptune. Sometimes we can hear clearly, sometimes we can't. And yet it's drawing us somewhere. We're not always clear on where that is. And so we might not always trust it. And when I consider Mars ending a cycle with Neptune and what's been going on this year, with the disillusionment with regard to our way of life in a lot of ways, the disillusionment with regard to what's to come as far as, you know, the fate of humanity in a lot of ways. When I consider that, and then Mars being kind of like in the rays of Neptune, as it's just about to start its own new cycle, moving into Aries in the not too distant future, I feel as though and this is why I have the 7 of Cups in reverse and the Devil reverse showing up on the screen. That wasn't a mistake. They're meant to be in reverse here, because what I'm attempting to convey here is it's kind of like Mars being our impulse, our impetus to act. It can feel kind of like hazy and confusing. It can feel, especially given the last current cycle, that we are trying to slough off or do away with or emancipate ourselves from, Devil reversed, from some sort of tyranny, control, something that has a hold on us. And yet with the 7 of Cups reversed, you can see here, again, like I'm just likening it to this Mars-Neptune energy. It's very unclear where things are leading, but sometimes it can be unclear what our motivations are. Why are we acting the way we are? What is motivating us to act? And with Mars and Neptune in Pisces, it's obviously going to be very emotional, but it can be not always clear what's emotionally motivating us. Interestingly enough, Neptune and Pisces, I have heard, you know, through word on the street, and it makes a lot of sense, at least Pisces, seems to rule media and glamour and illusion. And so it's interesting to consider that when comparing Neptune and Mars in a new cycle, because Mars being in a new cycle, it's starting, you know, new phase to Neptune. It's starting a new cycle of, from what I can tell, how we act in relation to our connection to the information we're receiving from source. And so with this cycle of Mars's cycle around the Earth, or around the sun, is about, I think, 1 year, 1.88 years. And so it's not a very long cycle, but it is a cycle that we go through in relation to our actions matching up to our spirituality. Are we being led astray? Are we even listening? You know, it's a very, like I've noted here, you know, whether Mars is aware of this shamanic residue that Neptune is kind of left onto Mars through the conjunction and even the sign of Pisces, Mars being in before it goes into Aries soon. I feel like whether we're aware of this kind of shamanic energy of darkness and shadow that can come up in us emotionally in our dreams, through interactions with others on all planes of existence, it will have an impact regardless. So yeah, okay, June 28th, I've got noted here, that's when Aries goes in, or Mars goes into Aries. So when we're thinking of a new cycle of Mars moving from Pisces into Aries, and you'll have to pardon my mealy mouthness today. I mean, I think Mercury is technically stationed, so forgive me. but yeah, so like my point is that like Aries moving into a new cycle from after shortly just visiting a new phase conjunction, ending a cycle with Neptune, like to me, I feel like there's a lot of baggage that is coming into the new cycle that if we're aware of it, we can use it very wisely in ways that will help us as far as the actions we're taking being in integrity to what our inner dictates are calling us to do. And given that it is a very, we could say, precarious time for humanity, it is definitely an easy does it kind of a thing, even with Mars being in Aries very soon. So just want to touch on using Mars mindfully from my perspective, of course. These are just some suggestions that could help. Some of you already know this, but I just want to share just in case somebody's coming across this content and would like this type of information. So first off, you want to consider your natal Mars. Before you even look at the transit, it's probably a good idea at least to consider your own natal Mars piece by piece. Get to know the sign. And even first, before you get to know the sign, consider Mars energy, impetus to act, impulse, myopic, right? It is very much these things. Consider what that means from your perspective. Then consider the sign that your Mars is in, the house, aspects it's making. You could even go even deeper and look at the house cusp ruler of the, like by sign and then the ruler. Look at your house cusp sign and then look at the ruler of that, I mean to say, just to be more clear. That Mars is posited in, right? You can also do that for your progress chart, your solar return. And then after you do all those things, and of course the bonus, progressed and solar returns are bonus, but after you've looked at your natal Mars, have a look at the transiting Mars piece by piece, the same way I mentioned, you know, consider Mars energy, how it acts, look at the sign, the house. Well, I guess if it's transiting, the house will be more relevant depending on your location, but if you're looking at it from a more holistic view, the house might not be as relevant. And just, you know, kind of look and see how Mars is communicating with other bodies in the sky at that point in time. Also, you're going to want to you might want to take your natal chart and then put the transits over that and do a synastry and have a look at how they're interacting in that way as well. So looking at them separately, but then putting them together to see how they're interacting. And of course, it's always important, like I said, to consider the gestalt of the chart as a whole, because we can get a lot of information from one piece, but it gives a lot more context if you're looking at everything, right? So piece by piece, though, don't overwhelm yourself. And if you're a veteran, you know, go right in there with both feet. And so next I wanted to just touch real briefly, although it's actually not briefly, it's like two slides, but I did want to go through this because I feel it's very important. So yes, Pluto is the desire of the soul, right? And Mars is how the desires are consciously manifested, like I was saying. So I have a quote here from Jeff Wolf Green, and it's from a talk that he did in 1988. It was a presentation I think he was doing or teaching. Very useful to know though. So I'll read it for you. So the next question becomes, what is the actual mechanism, at least linked with the human being, that creates and leads to growth, evolution? Of course, this starts with the soul. The soul in astrology, at least in our astrology, and I'm just going to throw in evolutionary astrology, correlates with Pluto. Most of us have learned that Mars is a lower octave of Pluto. Why is this? If we look at it very, very deeply, we will find that within the soul, there is a dynamic that correlates with the evolutionary progression of the soul. That dynamic is based on a dual desire nature within the soul itself. One desire is to separate away and separate away from that which creates us. We can possibly call what creates us God. Sorry, paraphrasing there. And the other desire is to return to the source of that which creates us. Of course, these desires are inherently antithetical and they go in diametrically different directions. This simple dynamic is the basis of what psychologists call free will or free choice. Very important to bear in mind that separation and returning impulse, free will and free choice. Pluto we're not always conscious of though, right? So it's interesting to see how Mars, being our conscious action, actually is iterating or expressing, or we could say following the orders of, in a sense, the subconscious impulses deeply embedded in Pluto in our soul. Continuing on, Jeff says, anything that you desire, at least 90% of it, will translate inevitably into an action based on desire. The very nature of that desire determines karma, right? Cause and effect. That's my ad there. Is it that, sorry, it is that simple. The evolution of the soul then is simply based on the progressive elimination of all separating desires to the exclusion of only one remaining desire. And that is the desire to reunite with the source of the soul itself. That is clearly going to take a long time for most of us. My point by breaking it down to Mars is that Mars simply acts instinctively upon the desires emanating from the soul, Pluto. Mars of itself does not have conscious forethought. There is no pre-plan. It is simply instinctual action. And instinct means just that. Without forethought, without conception, it is an impulse. Yes, and so the action creates karma. I kind of repeated it because it's really important. I just want to, the main piece I just want to reiterate here is the very nature of that desire, the desire of the soul, determines karma, right? The actions we take create karma. And yeah, I wanted to note real quick too, the nodes, right? Like, so of course in evolutionary astrology, planetary nodes are huge. They help us so much to bring context into how to use our energy now by getting context into our past, understanding that, and then using that to help us evolve into the future via like the North Node, right? And so Mars's nodal movement is, let's see here, it stays in Gemini until September 3rd, that's right. And then it moves into Cancer on September 3rd. I wanted to look up until September 10th because that's when Aries goes, or Mars goes retrograde in Aries. So that would be a good kind of point to put a little bookmark in, I guess we could say. So September 3rd, the North Node goes from Gemini into Cancer. It's interesting because Mars being in Aries with its North Node in Gemini, and then its South Node in Libra, which it will be in for the duration of the entire summer, at least up until September 10th, they're both air signs. And then Aries, or Mars and Aries, fire. So I just find this interesting because there's a lot of action-oriented energy here, and a lot of it is going to be communicative. And then if we consider the North Node of the Moon as well, being in Gemini and the South Node of the Moon being in Sagittarius, a lot of communication is going to help us, I feel, use that impetus to act that we'll all be feeling to varying degrees in ways that are, I guess you could say, mindful of our environment. Air energy does like to socialize and communicate. And so it is a lot more socially aware than we could say fire energy. Interestingly enough, the South Node of Mars is in Libra. And the South Node of, well, I mean, Libra, if you think about Mars and Libra energy, I mean, Venus rules Libra. So it's a kind of energy where I would have to say with the Mars and Aries, we may want to be careful of where we are acting based on confusion from projecting, maybe not listening fully well before we act. The South Node can imply that we do actually have those skills, but depending on who we are as people and where we're at in our karma and what's showing up in our own natal chart, this South Node may help us to use our Aries energy and Mars wisely over the summer through listening, through diplomacy, through careful wording, you know, mindful wording, considerate wording. But it can also indicate to a past where we might have been manipulative, codependent, using our Martian energy to get other people to do stuff for us. And with a Mars in Aries and then the South Node in Libra, you can definitely see a polarity between self and other that may need to be balanced. Luckily, that North Node in Gemini, I feel like having an open mind and a willingness to expand, we could say, we'll expand our mind. I know that's a Sagittarius thing in a lot of ways, but in Gemini, I feel like data collection and collaboration, communication, getting to know other perspectives so that we can build our empathy and even our conscience, our awareness of diplomacy, decorum. This can help us use that Aries, thoughtless, very, very thoughtless in a lot of ways, Mars energy in ways that can help us to not trip over our own feet, so to speak, or to cause violent situations that didn't need to happen. There is potential for that, given that there's a lot of volatile energy in the air these days. Let's see here. Oh, so yes, I did want to say there are some things I wanted to look at in the chart, and there's just so much going on. So I don't know if we're going to be able to cover everything in the talk today, but I did want to go over some dates for you to be mindful of, so that if you feel like having a look at those yourself, or just keeping them kind of in your toolbox for use later, good to know information, yeah? So we're already past this point, we're at the 17th of June, but I did feel it important to mention that on June 13th, there will be a conjunction between Mars and Neptune, or it already has, and that was in the third decan of Pisces. The third decan of Pisces, well, when it comes to decans, from what I understand at least, the first decan is the same sign that the sign is in, right? The second decan is the next sign, and then the third of that triplicity of that, well, of the element, right? And then the third decan is the following sign of the same element. So just as an example to clarify for you, the first decan of Pisces would be Pisces, and the decan is the 0 to 10 degrees, like a 10-degree chunk. The second decan, which would be about 11 degrees to 20 degrees, is, it would be 10 to 19. Either way, like I said, it's like 10 chunks of 10. We're taking those 30 degrees and splitting them up into chunks of 10. So the second decan in Pisces, we want to go to the next sign. Well, what's after that? Cancer. So the second decan of Pisces has got Cancer energy. And so it's kind of like another cloak sort of over the energy of Pisces. It's still Pisces, but it has kind of a Cancerian bent to it. And then finally, in the third decan of Pisces, that is Scorpio. So this is an interesting one. When you consider Pisces being the last sign of the zodiac, and then the last decan of Pisces is Scorpio, the transformation through, we could say, relinquishing of our ego, the potential for our transformation can be huge. It can also be very disillusioning and embarrassing and humbling, depending on what it is that we're doing to get to that point of, well, I guess we could say relinquishing faith, you know, relinquishing our lack of faith, I should say. So with Mars conjunct Neptune, well, Neptune does very much soften Mars energy in a lot of ways, but Neptune in Pisces, from what I understand with Pisces, there is issues of things like repressed rage. And given that Mars is a very, we could argue, angry planet, Neptune and Mars being in conjunction in Pisces, and then given everything that's happened, like with the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd, that was very much a tipping point for a lot of the people in North America collectively, especially in the United States. We can kind of see, you know, the buildup here, because Mars, you know, was ending its cycle in Pisces before it came across Neptune on June 13th. And so there's been a lot of this kind of buildup, and then with Mars conjuncting it, moving into a new cycle, you know, new phase conjunction, we can see that there's a lot of potential for us to use this Mars energy to let go of a lot of what we've been clinging to in reality that is not really real. The next date I wanted to look at here was June 27th, 2020, because that's when Mars moves into Aries. You know, new phase for Mars. Like I talked a bit about that already though, so I won't go too deep into that. I'm just going to move on to the next date here. So next we've got July 11th or July 12th, depending on your time zone, when Mars conjuncts. I found this interesting. It just conjuncts the moon and Chiron just as Chiron is stationing retrograde. And Chiron's in Aries right now. Around the time that they station retrograde, it's around 9 degrees or so. And, or when Chiron stations retrograde, it's about 8 or 9 degrees. And so very interesting that it's stationing retrograde, because Chiron, well, I mean, it's a pretty slow moving planetoid. I believe they've classified it as a planetoid at this point. But it's, you know, I mean, first, let's just, I guess, encapsulate Chiron very briefly. Chiron, you know, we've all heard the phrase, the wounded healer, but it goes so much deeper than that. It's a point of hypersensitivity within us that we may feel is unacceptable even to our own mother. And it is a point of pain that doesn't really seem to relinquish over the course of our life. And yet it offers us so much wisdom and context so that we can see that pain isn't always meant to well, I guess another way to put it is this pain can often contain incredible seeds of wisdom that we can use to build other people up in ways that maybe we can't do for ourselves. We can also, from what Ari Moshe has said, and I really like this because it makes a lot of sense, is that it can also be Chiron, a point where we hurt other people in the way that we hurt, right? And so with Chiron stationing retrograde on July 11th in Aries, I feel like it's going to slow down the oomph a little bit of that Aries energy. It's almost, in a sense, it's almost like a pre-Mars retrograde, I feel like, with Chiron being in Aries. So some of the things that may be highlighted are our masculinity, our use of masculine energy. Remember, Neptune's still in the sky at this time in Pisces as well. And like I said, there's still that residue. So I get this impression when I feel into this energy that one of the things we're going to have to watch, or at least a good thing to be mindful of, I feel, is where we might be misusing our power without realizing the damage we're causing. Aries energy, like I said, it's not always aware of what it's doing. I know this for a fact because I have an Aries moon and my North Node is on my rising. Sometimes we don't, like Aries energy just has no idea the impact that it has because it's fire energy and it's the first sign. So it's not thinking about other people. It is very much an impulsive energy. And so we can often, and I speak from personal experience, oh man, like one of my biggest karmas, sometimes we can do or say things, North Node of Mars in Gemini, South Node of Mars in Libra, sometimes we can do or say things that hurt people and we don't even realize we've done that. It's not about like walking on eggshells and being hyper aware of everything you say to the point where you are completely censoring yourself. Remember that double reverse card we were talking about with the Mars and Neptune, new phase, right? We're trying to move toward a state of freedom, freedom of self-expression, freedom of expressing the source within, the spirit within, the soul within, without being fettered or held back. And yet at the same time, part of the process, from what I can tell, to bring that about for ourselves, we're also being asked to give that to others too, through listening, communicating, and getting to hear new perspectives, new angles on things. And with Chiron stationing retrograde, I feel like it'll be a great time for us to learn about right action, we could say, right use of action in ourselves and others. And of course, like these are just my angles on it. We could see this from a ton of different other angles, right? Like this is not the be all end all of how we would interpret these weather systems, we could call it. August 3rd, Mars is in a first quarter waxing square to Jupiter retrograde, and it's also technically within orb of a first quarter square with Pluto. And the North Node of Pluto is also going to, I'm pretty sure that is in a very close aspect as well. I kind of want to go into my chart now, actually, because we only have so much time left. I have some charts I wanted to show you just to illustrate these points. So I have my notes on these weather systems on my phone here. So I'm just going to bring up my chart screen. Just bear with me for a moment here. Okay, I think you should be able to see the chart screen now. So I'm going to go right into August 3rd here. I apologize for the wait, but I'll get that right up on the screen. Here we go. So yeah, August 3rd, Mars in the first quarter waxing square with Jupiter. Yes, we can see at 19 degrees. That's right. And the south node of Pluto is at 19 degrees as well during this time. It's a really interesting weather system. This will be August 3rd. And I got to be honest with you, I can't say exactly what this is going to mean, but what we can see is it is a first quarter square, right? Mars in relation to Jupiter retrograde in Capricorn and the south node of Pluto in Capricorn as well. So some of the things we might be able to surmise from this with a first quarter square, it is very much a crisis in action, according to Dane Rudyard, the astrologer. Because if you think about, so if you think about Mars moving in a new cycle from Pluto, and then eventually getting to the point of its first square, there is very much kind of like a pull that's trying to kind of stop us from taking action in a sense, and it's usually coming from the past in this kind of a square. And so from what I can tell, with the past being Capricornian energy and also retrograde, and then we take into consider Chiron being retrograde and then Aries being, or Mars being in Aries, it may have a lot to do with us finding ways to be able to do and be what we're called to do and be instinctively and impulsively in a world where society is a little bit restrictive. But it's not just society, because these planets like Jupiter and all the planets, we can look at society through these things, especially when they're in Capricorn, planets in Capricorn. But it's also our psyche in a lot of ways too. And Jupiter has a lot to do with our belief system, has a lot to do with how we interpret the world philosophically. And when it's in retrograde Capricorn, conjunct the south node of Pluto in Capricorn, I can't help but think that this might be also asking us to be mindful of where we might be trying to dominate other people, where other people might be dominating us in ways where we could stand up for ourselves. Just because Mars is in Aries doesn't mean we have to get violent physically. I mean, if you think about just the concepts of natural law and sharing, caring, and inclusion and cooperation, it just stands to reason that there's always going to be a solution that doesn't require us to be violent unto others. We can find clever ways, right? North node of Mars in Gemini. We can find clever ways to get what it is we want without having to step on other people's necks and garrote them to do it. You know, like we don't have to do that. And so I feel like that first quarter square is a challenge. It's a character builder for sure. Squares in general, of course, are going to be character builders. And this will not necessarily be an easy fight. It might be a hard-won battle for our sovereignty in a way that is also in connection with our ethics and our conscience. And yet there are solutions. I noticed that Lucifer is also in a trine to Chiron around this time as well. So yeah, I won't get too much into that, but I do notice, just based on some of the things I've seen in the charts, like with the Leo energies going over the summer, especially where Narcissus is. It's not in the chart here, but just want to mention it might be a good idea. We want to check our egos during this time too. So on April 6th, we have another system I wanted to mention as well. Mars waxing new phase semi-sextile to Neptune, and then Jupiter and Pluto are still in square. Yeah, so who cares about semi-sextiles, right? I'm just kidding. It's just, they're not really popular in a lot of other schools of astrology. Luckily, and this is part of why I love EA so much, like they love looking at all the angles, right? And because there's a good reason. If you think about a cycle, there's not just going to be significant portions at the Ptolemaic aspects, like oppositions, conjunctions, squares, sextiles, trines, we're going to see the nuances of evolution at many different other angles, ones that maybe haven't even been mapped yet, right? And so the semi-sextile is a 30-degree aspect, at least in this case here, like I said, because this is a new phase semi-sextile. Let's make sure I have this correct here. Yeah, waxing new phase semi-sextile. So it's a 30-degree difference. As you can see here, Mars is at 20 degrees, Neptune's at 20 degrees. Neptune and Pisces, Mars and Aries. So I just wanted to bring this up because this kind of an energy can very much have like a tripping over its own feet kind of a feel to it. I'm just going to read from Jeff Wolf Green here. Not the semi-square, the semi-sextile. Yeah, so the 30-degree aspect. I'm reading from volume 2 of Pluto. And Jeffrey Wolf Green describes the 30-degree semi-sextile as the emergence or formation of a conscious and egocentric identification with a new evolutionary purpose or cycle. Random action narrows as the individual begins to sense specific directions or experiences that will allow realization or discovery of what the new evolutionary purpose or cycle is about. Interestingly enough, semi-sextile 30-degree aspect, it's also, if you think about it, it's right when, it's synonymous with Taurus, right? 30 degrees of Aries, and then the next sign is going to be Taurus. So it kind of has a Taurus feel to it. It is new phase, so there's still a lot of that impulse to go in our own direction, go our own way. Taurus is very much about self-sufficiency, but because it's yin energy, it kind of slows things down to a halt, so to speak, right? Taurus is very synonymous with the unstoppable force in a lot of ways. So if we think about Mars and Aries being in a semi-sextile to Neptune and Pisces, it's kind of like a reminder, at least from my perspective, given especially that Neptune and Pisces is retrograde at this point in time, on August 6th. It's sort of like are you really sure you're doing the things that you want to do? And are you sticking to your values? Are you, are you at peace with your actions? Can you be with yourself as you're acting and not lose sight of your inner self? Sometimes, like I said, Aries energy doesn't necessarily think, and it can act on impulse. And if we've got conditioning that is causing us to act in ways that could be seen as psychopathic, sociopathic, or exploitative, we might not, especially if we live in a society where most people have been conditioned to be that way, and again, these are just my observations, our fallback might be kind of to do a thing that isn't always going to be the highest road for us. And it's not because we're bad people, it's just sometimes we're not realizing what we're doing. And so with the semi-sextile, it's kind of this energy of meeting frustration inside and in the physical realm, in a sense, where it's a frustration that's trying to get us to remember that intention from the original cycle. At least that's my interpretation of it. And so during this time, it might be a little bit awkward using our energy in ways that are right for us. We might feel a little bit not entirely sure what's motivating us to act too, so it's probably good to be mindful. And so after that, we have August 16th. What's going on August 16th? Oh yeah, this is actually pretty important. Not that the other one wasn't important, but this one seems pretty important. So Mars conjuncts Eris on August 16th. And from what I understand, Eris and Aries, I think they're brother and sister. You might want to double check on that one, but I'm pretty sure they're siblings. And Eris being the goddess of strife and discord, and Aries being the god of war, being conjunct together in Aries, well, Mars being in its own sign, like its ruling sign in Aries, squaring Pluto, squaring Saturn, squaring, yeah, well, and then trining the sun in Leo. Like this whole combination, I guess if I could encapsulate this into sensical terms, into what it is that I'm seeing, I feel as though this, I don't want to make any predictions, but I do think this is going to be a time where it may be quite volatile, quite tense. It could be in your work environment with authority figures, with parental figures. It could be exercising your own authority that you're running into difficulty with. It could be in relationships. It could have to do with expressing your gender identity in ways that are right for you, expressing your masculine energy in ways that are right for you, or your feminine energy in a lot of ways too, being that Capricorn Cancer axis has a lot to do with gender identity. Not so much the Mars and Aries part, but the Mars and Aries part as far as, like I said, doing as we are called to from the impulse and instinct within us. We might have challengers trying to pull us kind of back into the pit, so to speak, with regard to our evolutionary progress. And yeah, with Eris there, we might see some world events that are quite impactful, being that Mars is entwined with the sun and with Mercury during this time, and Mercury's in a balsamic combust conjunction with the sun. It in Leo, Lucifer on top of that. I gotta say, well, Leo Lucifer is at least conjunct the north node of Neptune. So the guiding light here, from what I can tell, is it will be very important for us to be aware of what's motivating us to act. We can use this energy to really show just how our heart and our courage during this time. We can really show what we're made of and make great progress as well with whatever it is we're focusing on. I'm intentionally using pretty vague terms because a lot of this is going to be determined on an individual basis that I couldn't begin to predict for everyone. So these are just some ways that I could see things expressing and iterating. More than likely, this will be a time, though, for us where there's a good chance that we may be feeling with that the trine of fire energy, just, you know, how special our destiny really is individually and as a whole. We just want to be careful that we're not getting too much into it being all about us, right? With Capricorn energy, Pluto and Saturn being in Capricorn and both being retrograde, it's a perfect opportunity for us, for those of us who are doing inner work at least, to see where we are being too tyrannical, either toward ourselves or others. Another one, though, that's huge, me being a Capricorn, I just want to say, are things like guilt and judgment. We can be very judgmental with these kinds of energies, regardless of who we are. When Pluto and Saturn are in Capricorn and with the retrograde, it's a perfect time for us, through the revisitation of experiences with others and through ourselves and in society and our work and in our families, to see where maybe we can let go a little bit and not try to control everything. That there'll still be structural integrity, and perhaps even arguably, we could be building better structural integrity the less we control, so we're not choking the life out of everything, you know what I mean? Bringing more life to everything that we experience. I hope that makes sense. And so on September 3rd, because we're getting towards that retrograde now, September 3rd, I did want to mention, because there is a square showing up between Mars this time and Venus. And so this is an interesting one because Mars is also conjunct Black Moon Lilith, and this is the true Black Moon Lilith here. And this is in a first quarter square, Venus, you know, separating, well, I guess it's applying technically in this depiction, but she is moving faster than Mars, so it is a waxing square. And so with her being in Cancer energy, Mars being in Aries, and then we also have to take into consideration the opposition of Venus to Saturn. There's actually a cardinal cross going on here when you look at this, between Eris, Lilith, Mars, Juno, Saturn, more loosely Pluto, but I'll include it, and Venus. My God, September 3rd. Yeah, so a cardinal cross, again, it's a time where, well, okay, a cardinal cross first, that's 4 squares, right? We got square between Venus and Mars, Venus and Juno, Juno and Pluto, Pluto Saturn. Very, very important with cardinal crosses to not stop ourselves from moving, but to be mindful of all the energies that are showing up in the cardinal cross, because we've got our societal responsibilities, just, you know, briefly in Capricorn. We've got our emotional fortitude and sense of identity in Venus in Cancer. We've got our impetus to act and our instinctual urge to act in Mars and Aries. And then Juno, where, you know, as far as Juno goes, just briefly, at least from what I understand, Juno is the wife of Jupiter, so she has a lot to do with partnership and the compromises that we experience in partnership. That's very brief explanation. And she is in Libra, north node of Chiron conjunct that as well. My gosh, you know, I mean, I feel like everything's going to be popping off. Not like necessarily anything in particular, but what I mean is that paying attention to how we're acting, we're going to be experiencing because it's not just the squares, we've got oppositions here. This is very much going to be experiences that we have in the outer world with other people, in society, perhaps in the workplace, in the family, like I was saying, where it'll be a good time for us, especially with Venus being in a closing, a waning square to Juno, in addition to that opposition, to, I guess, how can I put it? This might sound really controversial, so I apologize. I've been kind of dancing around this point the whole talk, really. But like, where are we willing to grow up and stop conceding our authority to other people? Where are we going to stop being codependent on others and then projecting expectations on the others that are really our own to take care of? How are we identifying ourselves? Are we identifying with our gender to the point where we've externalized our identity? Are we identifying with a race, our nation, a group, a tribe, a clique, a peer group, an inner circle? Are we identifying with something that is not inherent to us? And our actions, because remember, Neptune's still hanging out here in Pisces, still impacting Mars to some degree because of the new phase conjunction with Neptune and Mars. Who, I guess we could say, who's pulling the strings? Are we pulling our own strings? Are we in an integrity to who it is that we are, not just inside of ourselves and in our mind and in our imagination? I mean, all of us, like, I'm sure a lot of us could think we're great people when we think about ourselves from a conceptual standpoint, but does it stack up in the physical realm? You know, the Capricornian realm, the Saturnian realm? Are you walking your talk? I feel like this cardinal cross is going to be, it may, for those who are at least paying attention, and maybe from some through like a cataclysmic circumstance, or some even like not cataclysmic circumstance, there's going to be an experience, from what I could tell, that all of us are going to have in some way, shape, or form, where these dynamics are going to come into play. Whether or not we're aware of it is a whole nother question, because if we're in consensus state awareness, it may not be the case that we're aware that we're being kind of swayed to act and do things that were dictated by an authority that we may not have actually consented to. We may have consented, but a lot of the time we're not informed, and so the consent is not conscious. And then in the individuated state of consciousness, there could be so much resistance against the Saturnian parental authority figures, or other people in general, or any particular group or tribe or race, where there could be a desire to just not open the mind to seeing other people's points of view, and feeling maybe even alienated in some ways from others, from community. I mean, just thinking about that now, I could see how that would even apply to me. I mean, I'm half black, half white. And ever since all the stuff that's even been going on earlier on this year, and even beyond that, I mean, if you look at my chart where my Pluto is, I mean, my Pluto's right on the IC, so I really get this a lot. Feeling alienated from people based on groups, like a race. Like, I don't feel like I identify technically as black, but I've never been accepted by any particular group, you know? If anything, I've been ridiculed by both sides, so to speak. So like, my point on this is just that this cardinal cross is actually pretty important, even arguably, because it's leading into the retrograde of Aries. It's just so interesting because, you know, nothing happens for no reason. Who are we? Are we externalizing our validation? What are our motivations? The spirituated people, you know, are probably going to fare a lot better, to be honest, than the consensus at this time, because from what I can tell, at least, and again, this is my perspective, where humanity is evolving, it is into higher states of awareness. We kind of need to, if we're going to survive and thrive on this planet, as we can see with, you know, Uranus and Taurus right now. It's kind of kicking us in the butt a little bit to get us to, I guess we could say, reconnect to what's inherent to us. I'm going to move on to September 10th. You know, and this is when Mars goes retrograde. It's an interesting time for Mars to go retrograde, because it's, when it goes retrograde, it's still opposing Juno. It's conjunct Lilith, Black Moon Lilith. It's going to reconjunct Aries in the in Aries in the not too distant future from then. The moon's conjunct the North Node. You know, and we still have some squares going on here with Saturn and Mars. So, and there's a lot of, when you look at it too, a lot of points in the chart are in the 20th degree or later or near it even. So from what I can tell, there's a lot of a feeling of something coming to an end of a cycle, but it not being quite time yet. And Mars retrograde has a lot to do with, at least from what I understand, right? Your mileage may vary. But my husband has Mars retrograde, so I'll pick his brain constantly to just kind of figure out what's going on there. And it does seem very much like it is internalized anger that needs to be processed in some way in order to, I guess we could say, understand the nature of Mars from within in a lot of ways. It being in Aries, and given everything that's showing up here, I mean, the reason why I'm even bringing up Lilith on top of this is because, well, Lilith is very a-Saturnian. Not necessarily the type that wants to follow Saturnian rules and structures. It's a very much an untamed primal feminine that's been sort of scapegoated and demonized in a lot of ways, vilified in the collective consciousness through fable and stories. And yet she's right next to Mars when Mars is about to go retrograde, which causes me to wonder, especially with Mars soon meeting up with his sister Eris again, Mars and Aries. I gotta wonder if we're gonna feel even more compelled than maybe we do already to blaze a new trail of ways of doing and being, to find new ways to exist on spiritual levels, new ways to get what it is we want. Interesting, the square from Saturn and Capricorn and Mars too. I see potential here for us to learn, and Uranus and Taurus, yes, new ways for us to learn how to work with others in order to build in the physical realm what it is that we've been crying to the government to do for us. Like, you know, find ways of creating food for ourselves, permaculture tech, ways to make money that might be not even necessarily incorporating money. New way to run a society, maybe little micro societies, micro communities, I don't know. I mean, we do know that there's going to be a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius in December. I wonder what that will be heralding. I guess maybe I'm jumping too far into the future. But yes, yeah, I just, I guess I'll leave it there. Just let me see, what else did I have? I did mention Uranus and Taurus, very important. Oh yes, so the last thing I wanted to mention just before I wrap things up here is that you'll notice that Mars goes retrograde as it's closing a cycle with Uranus and Taurus. Taurus, what's intrinsic to us? Survival, starvation. It's sort of like feast and famine, I guess we could say, with Taurus energy. Like I said, self-sufficiency, self-esteem, and peace and harmony within, connection to the planet, farming, things like that. It's just interesting that Mars doesn't quite get there to Uranus yet before it needs to go into a retrograde cycle. So there's something that we are revisiting on a Martian level as far as our actions and our behavior and even our masculinity and our sexuality are concerned, creativity, even our sense of specialness, our right to take action, our right to just be. There's something we need to revisit as far as that is concerned, how we fight for ourselves before we close the cycle with Uranus and Mars. And so even though when Mars goes into Aries, we may be, a lot of us, chomping at the bit to see change happen in the world because there's so much that could change for the better. It's still not quite time yet from what I can tell, but we are in a state of preparation. And if we take it a moment at a time and connect to the now moment, which is very much Aries energy, we can use Mars over the summer, during this summer of apocalypse, in ways that might surprise us as far as confirming just how strong we really are and just how effective we can be without needing to be violent. And so yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. And if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm more than happy to address them.
I just want to say what a great meeting, and thank you very much. We don't have any questions from the Facebook group. What about you, Chris? Do you have anything? No.
Okay, fair.
Do you have a last page of your contact details?
Oh, no, but just as far as contact goes, I just would recommend, if you want to get to know more about the types of astrology I do and the other type of work I do, I'm a psychic spiritual counselor in addition to being an independent astrologer, and I've got a lot of content that I upload to YouTube at my channel Adept Guidance. And so yeah, I would say if you're vibing with the content that I'm presenting here, I recommend that you subscribe to that channel.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much from all of us, and looking forward to catching you next time.
Thank you.
Bye for now.